Welcome back guys, it's Colin with the Sun Pirates TCG, and we are back with another Gundam video. So we're doing part 2 of our discussion for the banned/restricted list in the game, and as of this morning, Bandai has just given their official announcement. So going right into it, as for the banned cards, there's nothing. So nothing banned just of yet, but we do have a new card in the restriction list. So it's just one card being hit here, which is Corsica based. So now we are only allowed 2 copies in a deck. And they did attach a bit of an explanation here, so I'll just read it out. Originally designed as a base capable of deploying unit tokens as attackers while protecting the player throughout the game, Corsica base exhibits a strong influence on game outcomes that has exceeded our expectations. This card is included in a majority of decks using blue, and these decks have a high win percentage. We are adding it to the list as restricted too, in order to reduce its use in many faster decks, particularly blue-purple, and create more diversity in the meta. They also acknowledged the fact that it's a starter deck card, so they said, we recognize that 3 copies of Corsica base are included in the Wings of Advance ST02 starter deck, and players will still be able to use this deck in official and sanctioned tournaments, so long as no changes are made to its contents. So if you want to play with 3 Corsica bases, you have to play with the exact ST02 out of the box, which is fine for a new player, so once they start making changes to their decks, they just have to cut one of their copies of Corsica, which isn't the end of the world, right? So I'm totally fine with that. As far as the actual restrictions to Corsica itself, I think I'm also okay with it. Now, I did say in the previous video I wanted some sort of hit to this card, whether just be completely banned. I personally would have liked to see it completely banned, but restricting it down to 2 is an okay compromise because, again, I understand it is a starter deck card, right? At least with just having 2 copies, these aggro decks like blue-purple and blue-green can't go like way over the top by just spamming a bunch of Corsicas and making a bunch of Leos out of nowhere. Because again, the problem with Corsica is that it made bodies while also just like letting you draw cards to like replace a Corsica base you played, so you still have follow-up as an aggro deck. At least moving forward now, because you only have 2 copies, less consistently are you going to have multiple copies of Corsica, so you might have your 1 Talkies token for the game, and that's pretty much it, which I think is fine. And that'll be the start of this sort of like compliment sandwich that I'm doing for my initial thoughts on this band reaction. So going into some of the other cards that have been talked about, of course, the elephant in the room is ARC-78 from the starter deck and Amuro. Amuro, of course, being one of the strongest, if not the strongest pilot in the game at the moment. I get it. The issue with these cards being hit is that they still fall into the fact that they are starter deck cards. And of course, that would be like an overall mess, right? That the starter deck cards are a little bit too overtuned, right? But again, since that is the reality of the situation, new players have that as their entry point into the game, so I can understand not wanting to hit too many starter deck cards at once. And Corsica base would probably be the least drastic hit to new players getting into the game, whereas ARC-78 and Amuro, they're just so omnipresent in a lot of decks that people play with as like their first deck, right? If ST01 was one of their first products. So I understand Bandai's perspective for that. I personally would have liked to see ARC-78 be restricted in some way, shape, or form, or even banned, but again, that would be in my perfect world and not necessarily in Bandai's perfect world. Hopefully, as new cards get printed and as new sets come out, there will be more options to sort of like counter the ARC-78 Amuro link pair on level 4, or just having more powerful options in other colors. I'm not asking for like drastic amounts of power creep, but just something to make it where other colors have something at level 4 that are comparable to ARC-78 and Amuro, right? We were getting relatively close in green with the introduction of the Dynamis and Lock-On link pair from the Celestial Being starter decks, so maybe in other colors, if we get something similar to those, we have something there. Now, as far as other cards that have not been hit, I know a lot of people have been talking about the pingers. We've talked about it in the previous video with Gun Tank and other ones like Barbados Adapt. So with respect to the pingers, I understand not hitting them as well because we are getting more defensive options in the early game. So in GD04, we're getting a new Zowart in blue and a new white Elfrith. Like, they're literally the same exact text, just as different cards. So you can effectively play like in blue-white 8 copies of your Zowarts, so to speak, or 8 copies of your Elfriths if you want, or having Zowart adjacent as an option in like a blue X control deck, like maybe blue-red or something like that. So we are getting more of these kind of defensive options. Now, would I have liked to see them outside of blue and white? Sure, maybe in like green or something like that, right? But at least these are additional options in the card pool to sort of push back these aggro decks, right? Now, of course, we're probably going to get into this sort of dichotomy of like, do I want to play in like a blocker heavy meta or an aggro heavy meta. You know, which style of gameplay is more fun. I don't know. I'm kind of in the fence about it. It really depends on what else is out there. But hopefully the game doesn't become overly binary like that because, you know, as we get more cards, we have more options, so to speak. And as overall the general message I want to convey here is that things will change as we get more cards and more options and more products, right? So we have the Destiny Ignition starter deck coming literally as I'm recording this, as well as GD04 coming in less than a month. So hopefully things will already change organically enough to where this ban list was just enough of a change and not maybe too overbearing, which I think is what Bandai was trying to go for. Now, again, I would have liked to see at least like one other change from the cards that we had discussed, either this video or the previous video. But at least having something is better than nothing, at least in my opinion. So this was a relatively short one. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Was it enough? Was it not enough? And were there any other cards that we might have overlooked or Bandai has overlooked that needed to be addressed? But as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe as per usual, and we will see you in the next one.